All right, number 2 is the fig tree generation. It was prophesied in the book of Matthew, Mark, and Luke that Jesus talked about what we call the parable of the fig tree. It's also known as the Olivet Discourse. He was talking about the end times. And he was talking to his disciples and explaining, how do you know it's the end times? How do you know it's the end times? You will see this, 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 and this. Consider all the trees. Or perhaps let's take a look at the fig tree. Okay? When the fig tree does this thing, then you know that summer is near. And he goes on to describe how this fig tree is the evidence that the end times are on the doorstep. You are about to enter the end times. Well, the fig tree is also metaphorically used. Maybe you could say it's a type and shadow. Maybe you could say it's a metaphor, an analogy. The fig tree is used in the Bible as representing Israel. Now, there have been a number of different trees that have existed in the Middle East for many thousands of years. But the fig tree was one tree that was not around after Israel was scattered. The Israelites were scattered after the Roman destruction of the temple in 70 AD, which was about 40 years after Jesus was crucified. They were scattered. They were scattered to all the nations. There were Jews all over the world, but they weren't, most of them were not in Israel. But in 1948, the nation of Israel was established again in a miraculous way after World War II. This decision was put before the United Nations. It was ratified by the United Nations. Israel became a nation in May of 1948. Miraculously, this fulfilled a prophecy that's in the Bible. The easiest place to find this is Isaiah chapter 66, verse 7, I think, where God is describing how he's going to bring back all of his people throughout Isaiah. He's going to scatter them, but he's going to bring them back again. This was fulfilled in 1948. The nation of Israel was brought forth overnight. Of course, it took time to decide everything and decide how it was going to happen, but it did indeed take place with one vote in the United Nations. And in Isaiah, it describes this. When does this ever happen? When does a nation come to be born in a day, in 1 hour? But in Isaiah 66, it says, no sooner is this woman in labor that she gives forth to her children. All right, so this fig tree that was native to the Middle East wasn't blooming, wasn't blossoming, wasn't growing commonly all over Israel until 1948. It started to come back. The fig tree literally started to come back. Now, when Jesus was describing this fig tree, we sort of have the picture of an adult fig tree that's actually bearing fruit. Jesus said, that generation, that fig tree generation, will not pass away or die before all these things that I have said about the end times come true. In other words, the prophecy will come true in that generation. Okay, that generation is the generation, everybody in Israel who was born in 1948. Those people will not die before all of those things that he prophesied about the end times. They're going to come true. So, how old is a person who was born in 1948? Well, they're in their 70s. someone would be in their 70s. If we go back in the Bible and look and ask the question, does the Bible define what a generation is? And yes, it does. In Psalms, it describes a generation as being 70 or 80 years before they fly away. Now, if we take only that one phrase, then it may not have the prophetic significance that we're looking for. Also, Noah was the last person to live a really long life. In Genesis, it talks about how God said, I'm going to limit man's lifespan to 120 years. All right. Now, the word for years actually has a double usage, but we can come back to that another time. It could also be that he gave man 120 years or 120 time periods. All right, I'll come back to that one because that one's a little bit more mysterious. But indeed, today we don't see anyone living past 120 years of age. So there's kind of a limit here. We could say a generation is going to be maybe somewhere between 70 and 80, maybe at most 120 years. All right. So now I can say then, based on those pieces of information, we can expect that Jesus will be a liar if these end times prophecies don't come true before the year 2060 or so. And maybe, let's see. Yeah, maybe 2060, where people at the age of 120 will start dying. All right. I mean, these people who are 120 years old, that will be the end of Jesus's chance to fulfill all of those prophecies. Okay. But my suspicion is that we're going to start seeing them right now. Right now. Right now. Why would I say right now? Because Israel is not just somewhere between 70 and 80. Israel is 77 years old. Now, 77 is not 77 is not a lucky number if you're in the middle of China, okay? 77 is not a special number. But in the Bible, 77 is a special number. For example, Jesus is the 76th man from Adam, okay? He's the 76th in the long lineage from Adam in the Bible. But he could be considered the 77th man from God, the Father, okay? Now, 77 is so important that if you look at a very hidden little mystery that's buried, it's couched inside of metaphor, inside of the story of one of the patriarchs of Israel, a guy by the name of Jacob, then you will find a very interesting situation, an interesting convergence or coincidence here. Now, it takes a little bit of mathematical reasoning here to find out how old Jacob was. You have to go forward in the story and then walk backwards by some other clues. But this man Jacob, whose father was Isaac, whose father was Abraham, who made the first covenant with God, okay, to establish God's peculiar people in the place that we call Israel now. This guy Jacob was fleeing from his family's land, running away from his brother Esau, because Esau wanted to kill him. Why? Because Jacob deceived his father Isaac to steal the birthright and therefore the blessing of the inheritance, which should have gone to his elder son, who was Esau. Elder by only a few minutes, because They were identical. Not identical. They were twins. They were dizygotic twins. Anyway, Jacob and Esau had kind of a rivalry, and Esau got the birthright. Okay, and Esau should have had the birthright, but Jacob deceived his father and stole the blessing. Now, Jacob in Hebrew means deceiver or something like that. But along Jacob's route, he actually confronts God and wrestles with God and wants to get God's blessing. And wrestles with God and finally gets God pinched in this what do you call it? A pin, okay? And they did this all night long, all right? And finally, God reached out and touched Jacob's hip and dislocated his hip momentarily enough to give him a permanent injury. But from that day, he also said, "No longer will you be called Jacob, but Israel," which means one who wrestles with God. Okay, so Jacob's name was changed to Israel on that day by God. Now, along the path that Israel now took, he went out and he was trying to find. To make a long story short, he met his true love, Rachel. Okay, his true love, Rachel. And along the way, just before he met Rachel, though, at the age of 77 years old, he saw in a vision a ladder or a stairway to heaven with God at the top and angels ascending and descending on the ladder. Now, this was an important event in the story, I think for another reason that we'll come back to, especially the rapture and the timing of the rapture. Later, after he sees the stairway to heaven, he meets Rachel, falls in love with Rachel, but he ends up getting into servitude by Rachel's father for 7 years. He has to work for him for 7 years before he can marry Rachel. And he ends up trying to marry Rachel, but on the night of their wedding, he sleeps with Leah. He accidentally marries Leah instead, Rachel's sister. And Laban, her father, explains, well, you can't marry Rachel. She's the younger one. You need to marry the older one first. And if you give Leah her 1 week, and then you can marry Rachel, and then promise to work for me 7 years, I'll let you marry Rachel. I promise. This time I promise. 7 years more, then you can marry Rachel. So he ended up giving 14 years to this father-in-law. Anyway, at the beginning of this whole thing, when Israel or Jacob meets Rachel, it is known as Jacob's trouble. Okay, he's entering into some trouble with Laban, who is a type and shadow of the Antichrist. Okay, this guy is kind of deceptive, and he's not making fair deals. He's changing things along the way, changing the rules to fit his own circumstances. All right. So Jacob's trouble becomes an analogy for later on for the whole nation of Israel. Jacob's 12 children become the 12 tribes of Israel that we know of today. The 12 tribes of Israel, all right, come from Jacob. And Jesus comes from the 12 tribes of Israel. He comes from the tribe of Judah, all right. King David comes from Judah. Solomon comes from Judah. All right. Now, Jacob's trouble is also talked about in the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah talks about Jacob's trouble. the nation of Israel, or Jacob, okay, Jacob's nation ends up having some trouble with their neighbors. Among them, Elam. Okay, it's talked about a big war with Elam. Well, this war, which is a prophetic war, an end times kind of a war, has not happened yet. Until now. Elam, the old word Elam, is now Iran. Israel is now at war with Iran, and it is 77 years old. That is not a coincidence, and I tell you, this war is going to last for 7 years. And it's going to get worse. It's going to get very worse. Much worse. Much, much worse. More on that later. But we can expect that 2025 is the beginning of Jacob's trouble, and 2032 we expect to usher in the return of Christ. Now, why is Jacob's trouble happening? Because Jesus is the Messiah, but they did not accept Jesus when he came the first time, and it's prophetically embedded in the whole Bible. Everything points to Jesus in the Bible prophetically. Even in the book of Genesis, it talks at length. It doesn't talk at length about how everything points to Jesus. It's a hidden mystery. But the two witnesses are going to come and speak at length about how everything points to Jesus. But those two witnesses will probably come down at the time of the rapture. You remember Jacob's ladder? Jacob saw the ladder around the age of 77. We can see this ladder where angels were ascending and descending. Now, there were two people who were raptured before Jesus, Enoch and Elijah. We expect to see Enoch and Elijah come down when we go up. Enoch and Elijah will go and preach to the nation of Israel. They're going to end up being defeated, but while they are there, they're going to be very persuasive, and they're going to collect together a large group of people who are willing to believe in Jesus, Yeshua, as being the Messiah. Okay? Now, once they have started to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, then Jacob's trouble is going to get smoother and smoother, and Jesus himself is going to deliver them out of the hands of all of their neighbors who are trying to defeat them. Now, one thing to realize here is that the whole world is going to align itself against Israel, partly because, well, probably primarily because there is a spirit of confusion, that is upon the whole world, that is allowing the whole world to recognize evil as good and good as evil. And this is all the handiwork of the devil. But it's going to prophetically be used for God's glory. Now, right now, Israel has one strong ally in the United States. The entire Iron Dome Patriot missile system that they are using right now has sheltered them from over 1,000 missiles, Scuds, that have been launched at them from just about every neighbor that is around them, Israel. But without the Iron Dome system, Israel is powerless against all of these missile strikes. Israel does not have an Iron Dome system that's effective enough against all of these missiles. And not only that, there has been an increase in the technology, okay? There's a leveling up of the technology, and it's about to come into play, and that's the development of the hypersonic missiles. Hypersonics cannot be shot down by the Iron Dome system. Now, Israel very soon after the rapture, is going to lose its most important ally, the United States, because the United States is going to be destroyed. The U.S. is going to be destroyed because of A.A. Allen's prophecy, as I mentioned in the last video, the destruction of America. He's not the only prophet that has prophesied this. There have been many others, but the world has not been listening, okay? There's another prophet by the name of Barnett who has preached and prophesied in Ukraine. He received dreams about a Ukraine war ahead of time, which preceded an attack, a surprise attack on the United States. So find Barnett, who preached in Ukraine, and you will find his other prophecies. Two separate dreams, the same dream, same intensity, only 10 years apart. I strongly recommend that you research Barnett. I can't remember his first name. Maybe Philip. Anyway, after the United States is taken out, Israel is not going to have any defenses, especially against hypersonics. But Israel will have an ally in their Father in heaven. And that is when we will see the great war of Armageddon. Okay? There's a little hill in northern parts of Israel called Megiddo. Okay? The hill of Megiddo. Har means hill. Megiddo is a little area, is like farmland. Okay? The hill of Megiddo. Har Mageddon is the translation. That's basically, that's a flatland which will be a northern route. Okay, if an enemy were to enter with troops from the north, they would have to pass through Har Megiddo, or the hill of Megiddo, or Harmageddon. So there's going to be a battle there. It's going to be a huge battle. It may be a mixture of real earthly people as well as supernatural stuff going on. I don't know. It's around the corner. I'm not going to be there to see it because the rapture happens first.